Hello, my name is Kai Kennedy, and I'm the Accessibility and Inclusion Training Specialist for the City of Boston's Commission for Persons with Disabilities. This training will cover free and low-cost ways to remove architectural and environmental barriers to increase accessibility in your business or organization. So when we talk about access for people with disabilities, the first topic that's usually discussed is physical barriers. And believe it or not, there are a lot more than just physical ones, from stairs to door handles, table heights, signage, websites, and more. There are lots of different types of barriers that disabled people may encounter every day. So in this training, we're going to discuss some free and low-cost ways to remove the most common barriers that your business or organization might be having that makes it difficult for accessibility and to welcome patrons with disabilities. So let's first look at architectural building barriers. This is the most common thing that people think of. So we're going to talk first about the actual barrier and then some solutions. So barrier here might be buildings that have a single step at the entrance or a raised threshold. They're difficult, if not impossible, for some disabled people to enter. So especially those that use mobility aids such as wheelchairs or scooters. Solutions could be to add a small ramp. This could be either a built-in ramp if there's room, or you could purchase a portable ramp that can be deployed upon request. Both are totally valid ways of solving that barrier or removing that barrier. Installing a threshold ramp to make the entrance level, and then installing a doorbell in an accessible location with signage showing the wheelchair icon stating that assistance is available if needed. There is a ramp that needs to be deployed. It might be a good idea to have a doorbell there that says please ring for assistance, again with the wheelchair icon. So that folks know if they need to be able to get into the building via ramp and there's stairs in the way, they can just press that doorbell and somebody will come to deploy the ramp. So another barrier would be heavy front door and inaccessible door handles. People with and without disabilities often have trouble opening large and heavy doors, including many older adults who lose their strength as they age. Round doorknobs are not accessible to those who can't form a closed fist, have limited dexterity, or lack the strength required to grip and turn a doorknob. So some solutions instead could be to install an automatic door opener with a push button. I'm also a huge fan of the buttons that are wave buttons. So instead of just having to push it, you can just wave your hand in front of it. You can leave the door propped open during business hours, replace all doorknobs with lever handles, and make sure there's enough space surrounding the door to allow adequate turning radius for someone using a wheelchair to maneuver while opening the door. So inaccessible doorbells. Adding a doorbell can be a simple solution to an architectural barrier that is difficult to remove, like a steep flight of stairs at the front door. But doorbells are often placed in places that are too high for wheelchair users and little people to reach. So some solutions: place the doorbell in a visible location near the entrance and post signage containing the wheelchair icon. So make it very clear that's what the doorbell is for. If there are steep steps leading up to the door, try to find a place to put the doorbell that's more ground level for those who can't walk up the stairs, and add an intercom for two-way communication. You also want to install a doorbell within the reach range of someone who is using a wheelchair or a person of short stature. So alternate accessible entrance. Some buildings will not have the accessible entrance right at the front door. It may be on a side door or a back door, and though it's not ideal, it can still provide access as long as the patron knows where it is. So the solution to this being in an alternate location other than the front door could be to add signage at the main door with the wheelchair icon, arrows, and directions to the accessible entrance. And put this information on the website as well, so that if folks go to visit, they can see ahead of time, maybe even a map or something of that nature of where they should be able to go to find the accessible entrance. You want to make sure that the path is clear and accessible. It should have a smooth and level surface that's at least 3 feet wide. And install an accessible door and doorbell at the alternate entrance, especially if it's located at a door that is not frequently used by patrons. So vertical access barriers. Some older buildings um, are able to make the first floor accessible, but they may not have the space or funding for an elevator. In order to fix this, you can set up a computer on the first floor to show other areas of the store or building business to disabled patrons who can't use the stairs. You can offer to bring items down from the first floor for disabled patrons and let them know about your online services. If there's a vertical lift rather than an elevator, make sure to keep it well maintained and check it regularly to make sure that it's working. Don't block the entrance or to the lift or use it for storage. Hold regular trainings for staff on how to use the lift and place instructions on the lift so that folks can be able to use it on their own. And add accessibility information onto your website, including your reasonable accommodation policy. Okay, so what do you do if your building is completely inaccessible? Some buildings have architectural barriers that are either very costly to remove or might require reconstruction of the entire building. This is especially true in Boston, where a lot of vertical buildings with no elevators or they're on small lots. So solutions to this could be adding information to your website about online options for purchasing good and utilizing services, and always include pictures and alternate text. Create an accommodations policy of bringing items out front to your customers or providing home delivery if possible. Set up sidewalk sales to sell items in accessible outdoor locations, and host trunk shows to sell goods at accessible indoor locations. Okay, so we're moving on now to interior and exterior barriers. So some interior barriers might include cluttered and blocked spaces. For example, cluttered indoor space and crowded aisles can make it difficult for people in wheelchairs, service dog users, and others to get around, and also can impact the independence. So solutions could be rearranging displays and miscellaneous items to clear an accessible pathway. Arrange to have storage space to hold overflow items and use that storage as much as possible to avoid clutter. If there is an elevator or vertical lift, be sure that their entrances are clear and the buttons and controls are not blocked. And don't store any items like boxes or chairs on a vertical lift or ramp, even if they aren't used very often. Another barrier can include bright lights, loud music, and other noises. There are several types of disabilities that can be harmfully impacted by overwhelming sensory input, such as bright lights, flashing lights, loud music, and other noises. And so some solutions to this could be to designate sensory-friendly hours where lights and music and noise are kept to minimum levels. Post information on your website describing the interior condition of lighting and sound. Avoid flashing lights unless they're a critical piece of an event or program, and ensure that signs are easy to read. Some exterior barrier locations include inaccessible path of travel, so cracked sidewalks, missing curb ramps, faded crosswalks, broken street lights, the list goes on. This can create barriers that make it difficult for disabled people to reach your building, even if the building itself is accessible. So some great solutions for this would be to report any barriers that are located in the public right of way to Boston 311 and make sure that you're including pictures. Keep the sidewalks clear. Don't place signs, sandwich boards, or other obstructions in the path of travel. Ensure that snow is shoveled shortly after the storm to create a 42-inch wide accessible path of travel. And if you have a parking lot, add an accessible space with a wheelchair icon sign and an accessible aisle. If you don't have a parking lot, you can request an on-street space from the city. All right, so this section can be helpful specifically for restaurants. A lot of restaurants have inaccessible tables, so their table height, type of table, built-in booths, etc. These can be inaccessible. High top tables are extremely trendy and aesthetically pleasing, but they're not universally accessible. Also, booths and bars are not always built to be accessible. So some things to keep in mind. Be sure to place standard height accessible tables in every area of the restaurant and leave enough space to pass in between. Tables with 4 legs are much more accessible than those that stand on a central post. Booths should be constructed to be floor level. And if your restaurant has a lot of high top tables, allow people to reserve an accessible table, even if your restaurant doesn't typically take reservations. So be sure to add this information to your website and make it an option for them to reserve a specific table that's accessible. Outdoor dining might be located on sidewalks if they're wide enough, on street patios or private property. And outdoor dining must also be accessible. It can't impact accessibility on the sidewalks. So we want to make sure that sidewalk dining doesn't encroach on the pedestrian path of travel with restaurant fixtures, sandwich boards, or hostess stations, things like that. The path of travel must be 5 feet wide. Accessible standard height tables are required. So if you have picnic tables, at least one of them should have removable benches rather than the built-in ones. And build out on-street patios must be level with the sidewalk, so there can't be any steps or thresholds. And if you're building a bar, make sure that one section of it is an accessible height, so a maximum of 36 inches from the ground. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about advertising and communications as far as what barriers can be removed. Every business, large or small, needs to do marketing, but a lot of times accessibility is not thought about beforehand, so people with communication and other disabilities aren't able to get the information. So some solutions to this could be to add a page to the website with information on accessibility of your building. Create and post accommodations policy for people with disabilities. Always use alternate text and image descriptions for all posts with photos and for pictures on your website. You want to embed open captions in all videos and get connected with the disability community. Okay, so now that we've gone through a lot of barriers, of course, there's, I'm sure, many more. Let's do a little bit of testing your knowledge to name that barrier. So in this section, I will describe the photo on the screen and see if we can together identify where the barrier is. So this first photo is of a storefront of a restaurant called Wayfair Tavern. There are about 3 tables out front, each with removable chairs. Each table has 4 chairs that are removable, so they're not built into the actual table. There are large windows in front of the table. At the front door, there are a few flower pots, some pretty large doors, and a slight step to get into the doors. So if you are visually able to see the image, take it in. If you are not, you can rewind to listen once again to my description and see if you can identify where a barrier might be. Okay, I'm going to allow the red arrow to appear on the screen, and this arrow is pointing specifically at the steps. So there's one step that has, in order for you to get into the restaurant, there doesn't appear to be any ramp, doesn't appear to be any bell or sign that says ring if needing assistance. And I could have also mentioned or put an arrow for the door itself, but we don't know how heavy it is. It might not be heavy enough to really warrant an automatic door. However, the door is closed and it is above that step. So that could possibly be another barrier if the door doesn't remain open during the day, or if there isn't enough room to open it because of that step there. Okay, this is another photo. On this screen, there is a ramp that seems to lead up to the front porch of a residence. At the top of the ramp, there's a large box that looks like a package that was delivered by some sort of a mail service. And off to the side of that box, there are a couple of chairs that are up against the wall or the building itself, and a small bowl that looks like it's being used for a pet's water or food. Again, if you are able to visually see this image, take it in. If you are not, you can rewind to listen to my description and see if we can find where the barrier is. Okay, once again, I'm going to allow the red arrow to come up on the screen. And this red arrow is pointing at the box that is at the top of the ramp. Whoever placed this box here, again, it looks like it is a box for delivery. Um, this person or family member or whoever lives in this building would not only not be able to get past the ramp because it is in front of it, so they wouldn't be able to go down the ramp, but if they are returning home, they also would not be able to come completely up the ramp either, unless of course they had some type of a home care aide or another family member who was able to lift the box for them. So this is definitely a huge barrier, and especially right outside of somebody's residence. If you are delivering packages or things like that, hopefully the resident themselves has some sort of a sign that says where to put them, but it's always best to make sure that they are not placed directly in front of a ramp, a wheelchair ramp. Okay, so we have another photo here. This is of a photo of an aisle of drinks within a store. On the right-hand side, there is a large cart, or stand rather, that kind of comes out from where the actual display is. And this cart has several boxes, looks to be about 6 boxes of various types of either a champagne or sparkling wine or something of the sort stacked on top of this cart. So it does protrude into the main aisle. The cart looks to be about 2, maybe 3 feet wide. So again, this is coming off of the side of the aisle that is built in and has the rest of the merchandise displayed. Again, if you are able to visually see the image, take a moment to look at it. And if not, you can rewind to listen to my description. Okay, once again, the red arrow is coming onto the screen to point at this cart that I described that is about 2 to 3 inches, or sorry, 2 to 3 feet off of the display. And it is, encroaching on the aisle itself. So it's going to make it difficult for somebody who might have a service dog or is a wheelchair user, or just has any sort of mobility aid that just needs a little bit more space to come through the aisle, because it is, again, taking up an additional 2 to 3 feet of that aisle that would have been cleared otherwise. Okay. We have another photo here of a restaurant bar. On the left-hand side of the screen, there's a bar with lots of high top tables pushed up against it. On the right side of the screen, there are also some high top chairs. They're not as high as the ones on the left, but they're still pretty high top. And both sides of the bar, so the left side that has all of the higher chairs and the right side that has the slightly lower but still high chairs, are pretty close together. I would estimate that there is about 2, maybe 3 feet of clearance between the two for an aisle to get down to the last chair at the end of each side of the bar. So again, if you can visually see the image, take a moment to look and see what barriers you can identify. And if you cannot, you can rewind to listen to my description. Okay, so this time I'm going to allow 3 arrows to come onto the screen, all red. And they're pointing at both sides of the bar. So I described that the left side has high top chairs. The right side has high top stools. They're not as high as the chairs, but still pretty high. And the aisle itself is pretty narrow. So all 3 of these combined would make it incredibly difficult for somebody, again, who is a wheelchair user, uses any sort of mobility aid, might have a service dog, to navigate down this aisle. Now, even though both the chairs and the stools on either side of the bar are removable, so they're not built into the bar. Again, the countertop itself is still a high top counter. So even if you were able to remove those chairs to allow space for a wheelchair user, they still would not be able to utilize the bar itself because the height is not at a standard height. And you would be unable to place your food, your drinks, or anything on the counter if you were a a person of shorter stature or a wheelchair user. Okay, so hopefully you found this information useful. A summary of these suggestions can be found in this document, which is called Free and Low Cost Barrier Removal One Pager, and will be linked in the description of this video. And you can use this survey called Accessibility Self-Assessment to estimate your current level of access within your establishment. This link will also be found in the description of the video. For more information or questions, you can contact the City of Boston's Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities, ada@boston.gov, and our phone number is 617-635-3682. To stay up to date on local disability news as well as events that our office hosts, you can sign up for our newsletter by visiting boston.gov/disability and scrolling to the bottom of the page. You may also visit www.mass.gov/orgs, ORGS/architectural-access-board, or www.newenglandada, all one word, .org, to file complaints and receive assistance and information regarding this or other titles of the ADA.